be learned by going back there again to go somewhere else. But clearly the somewhere else was the ultimate objective. Now, I've witnessed the implementation of this with concern, primarily because the accident board justified an implementation that involved a small rocket for the crew and a big rocket for other things. So we have to develop two. And they became not easy to derive as time went on, more expensive, not living up to expectations again. We didn't go to the moon with two rockets. We had a Saturn I and a Saturn V, but we used a Saturn V, and we'd used several of them because we were concentrating on one rocket. Okay, we started out, in my estimation, by trying to do it with two rockets instead of one. And then it began to come apart, in my estimation, by absorbing all the funds that would let us allow the people of the world and the people of our nation who will have seen astronauts land on a runway for 28 years, we will allow them not have to buy a ride with another nation that we're not on exactly great terms with right now. For 5 years or 6 years, we're going to have to pay over $50 million for each astronaut that goes up there. That's not a very good transition from what we've been doing to what we're doing in the future. Why? Because we can't afford to spend money on anything but the cheapest way to take cargo up and down, take people up and down, and that's the land and the ocean, because that's what we did when we started out. I think that's a poor transition. We could be landing on a runway. Now, is going back to the moon, when by the time we get there, we will have spent so much to do again what we did and explored and learned so much. And it was only when other nations begin to get interested in the moon that maybe now we're interested in it and they're interested in it, and people talk about a race. It would be the silliest thing totally for America to allow people to think that we're in a race when we've already been there 50 years ago. So we can take our talents and our experience and help other nations be cooperative, be sharing, be benevolent to other nations with our experience, help them to reach the point where they can. I'll answer the second question. No. I don't think anyone else does either, unless they're already from some other place and are covering it up. In which case there are a lot of gullible people who might go along with them. I have a very fascinating, detailed account of what I believe was pertinent to the event 40 years ago in a detailed book called Magnificent Desolation. Hopefully it'll get made into a movie, and then you may see or you may read in there a little bit more of what I feel. Now, there have been other movies, From the Earth to the Moon, that took the writings of other people who interviewed a lot of people, and they probably were biased toward fanning the embers of anything that looked like a weakness on one person's part, an overbearingness on somebody's part, my father did never picket the White House. You got to be kidding! if he felt that angry about a stamp that didn't say Armstrong and Aldrin, it said first man on the moon. All right? Well, there were two people on the moon, not one. Okay, should I just say, wonderful, one man went to the moon, that's wonderful, let's celebrate all of that, let's have a stamp for that? Was it Lewis or was it Clark who did something first? We landed that spacecraft as a team. We landed that. That was the most important thing to do. I'd been outside the spacecraft before, the first really successful spacewalk in Gemini 12. But it was not the symbolic pleasure of the American people and of the media to have a junior person go outside first, even though that was always the way it was done in spacewalks. And even Apollo 9, the commander was inside and the lunar module pilot went outside through the hatch and came back in through the other spacecraft. Nobody thinks about those things if there's a little juicier controversy that can be fanned by somebody trying to point out the pros and cons of the decision one way or another, which clearly had not been made. There were timelines that clearly had the lunar module pilot going out first. Do you know that? There were. And there were people who somehow didn't want to make a decision. We call it a hot potato. Nobody wants to touch the hot potato. And our training is delaying, so we need to get a decision. And I wanted to get a decision on that.
But Buzz, just to make sure we've answered the question for the lady, I think the question is really also comes back to, do you feel this film represents how it felt to make that journey? Are there things in the film which make it a reasonable and accurate representation of how it happened for you?
Until you added the "for you."
Oh, well, until it happened.
It's a story about two guys that landed on the moon. And to try and make it specifically applicable to two individuals.
I ask about you because you're the one I'm asking. Not because it's
I
about
know,
you.
but you asked, does this give people a sense of the feeling? Yes,
Yeah.
it does. For the two actors who played those parts and followed the script very, very accurately, a very well written script. But it just is not exactly the way I would have written the script. It's probably the way some other people might have, but I've been very fortunate in as the result of accidents. I've been propelled ahead. As a result of changing crews here and there, I ended up on the backup crew of the first flight that orbited around the moon. That wasn't a deserving role for a doctor of science from MIT coming into the space program, but that's what I got. I was on that wondrous backup crew that observed the training for the first human beings to go to another location and to build up in the same orbit that the next mission that went to the moon was in the same orbit that we went into on the third mission. They all laid the foundation one after another. And because of being on the backup crew, it was logical to be put on the third mission from them because we had crews for Apollo 9 and Apollo 10 already selected. So things just fell into place. Now, for very competitive people, does that sometimes make somebody a little jealous, perhaps, of a person that might get the cards coming his way, might get a couple of aces on the deal? I think we're dealing with human beings that have feelings, and they have feelings of desire to perform, to not make a mistake that we have to live with for the rest of our lives.